Yes, I currently have people calling me from the hospital that have been staying for the hospital for a week and they still have not realized that their house is destroyed. And I'm still accepting everyone until the situation is safe again.
Okay. So how do people get in touch with you if they do need a roof over their heads tonight, Christopher?
So I shared on social media my phone number and everyone is calling me, asking for help. And yeah, that's it.
All right. Christopher, many thanks indeed for coming on to tell us about it. And
I would like to share a message if it's possible.
Please do. Go on. Go on.
Yes, I want to say for the whole world, no matter what is your religion, no matter what is your skin color,
all right.
or what is
many thanks.
your nationality, don't let this humanity in you die. Because at the end of the day, God is love, and love is always the answer for everything.
Christopher Nader, the owner of the Eden Hotel in Beirut. Many thanks indeed, Christopher.
Thank you for having me today.
US presidential hopeful Joe Biden is to meet his running mate, Kamala Harris, in his hometown of Wilmington, Delaware, in the coming hours. It'll be their first appearance together since Biden named her as vice presidential contender on Tuesday. They're expected to host a virtual fundraiser for their campaign. Al Jazeera's Alan Fisher joins us now live from Washington, D.C. A virtual fundraiser, Alan, how's that going to work?
Well, the way that a lot of the campaign events have been working at the moment, they'll go online, they'll get people to join in and they'll ask them to contribute. What is interesting is that the Biden campaign says that between 4 and 5 yesterday, just after the announcement of Kamala Harris was made, she is going to be the VP pick. They say they had their best hour of fundraising. That would certainly buck against the idea that many Republicans have been floating in the morning shows here in the United States and late last night, that there isn't a great deal of enthusiasm for Kamala Harris as the VP pick, and it certainly wouldn't play out a campaign that really hasn't ignited because of COVID and because really the candidates weren't that exciting. There was no great moment that we saw, particularly when you compare it to the Republican campaign in 2016. There was no great moment, but this was perhaps the biggest standout moment so far when Kamala Harris was announced. Donald Trump, of course, polled about 2% and then pulled out, said that's the sort of opponent we like to face. What is interesting, of course, is that Kamala Harris has been fundraising. She's raised about $5 million for the Biden campaign. She is fairly popular among the Democrats. And it's also interesting to note that Joe Biden picked someone who was always going to be near the top of the VP picks anyway. The fact that she is a woman of colour obviously helped, given that he'd committed to picking a woman early in the process. But she really fits the mould of former VP candidates. You really only go outside that mould when you think you're far behind and don't have a chance of winning. Geraldine Ferraro, Sarah Palin, they're two examples of that. Kamala Harris doesn't fit into that mould at all. She is what many people would regard as a safe pick, and at 55, speaking to a few independent voters last night, they are certainly reassured that the choice was Kamala Harris.
So to what extent is she the catalyst that will set this campaign alight for both sides, both campaigns?
I'm not entirely sure, as good a campaigner as she is, that she sets the campaign alight. Again, it's interesting to see what the Republicans are saying. And in my Twitter feed today, back to back, there was one who's saying, oh, the choice of Kamala Harris will certainly please Wall Street types. That means that we'll kowtow to China. Trade deals will be abandoned. This is a really bad pick for the country. And right below it, from another senior Republican, was saying, oh, this is the choice that the anarchists wanted, the people who are bringing trouble onto our street. And it shows the difficulty the Republicans have in framing Kamala Harris. And that's been always important to Donald Trump. He was able to frame his primary opponents very well, Lion Ted Cruz. He's tried it with Sleepy Joe Biden. It doesn't quite work. He's now trying to find a frame where he can attack Kamala Harris. And the Republican Party still hasn't found that yet. It's August. It may well happen. But the fact that they're flailing around shows that they have a problem too with messaging, and the fact of those two tweets shows that they're not quite sure how to attack Kamala Harris either. So it seems like a good pick for Joe Biden. He will undoubtedly get a bounce in the opinion polls. That's what happens when you pick your VP. But the Republicans are more concerned that Donald Trump is behind, even though he has tweeted this morning that he's got but he says we're also ahead in many swing states. Not in any of the polls that I've seen, to be honest.
Al Jazeera's Alan Fisher reporting live from the White House in Washington. Alan, many thanks. Investigators in New Zealand say that imported freight may have been the source of the first locally transmitted coronavirus cases in more than 3 months. The country's largest city, Auckland, is now back in lockdown after 4 cases were diagnosed there this week. 4 other suspected cases are being monitored, and the government is considering delaying next month's general election.
Now, while our primary focus, of course, is on the response in these immediate stages over the next few days, we do need to ensure that we're giving ourselves as much flexibility as possible to deal with what we learn over the next 72 hours. Parliament dissolving does mean that if we needed to convene Parliament for any reason, we wouldn't be able to do so. We've therefore decided it would be prudent to defer the dissolution of Parliament by at least a few days to preserve all options for, if needed, reconvening Parliament, or if needed for the purposes of the date of the general election.
Australia has recorded its worst day of the pandemic. 21 people are reported to have died in the past 24 hours in the state of Victoria. Hong Kong's biggest air carrier says that it's recorded a loss of $1.27 billion in the first half of this year. Cathay Pacific has been badly hit by political and economic turbulence over the past year. A slump in passenger demand caused by the pandemic has grounded its international flights. Cargo business is now generating more revenue than passenger flights. The coronavirus pandemic has plunged the UK into its deepest economic slump on record. Gross domestic product collapsed by more than 20% between April and June, the height of the lockdown there. The British economy is now officially in recession for the first time since the 2008 financial crisis, but there are already some signs of recovery. GDP recovered slightly in June as restrictions were eased.
When we were talking about this a few months ago, I said that hard times were coming, and today's figures show that hard times are here. Hundreds of thousands of people have already lost their job, and sadly, many more will. But I will say to people, although tough decisions lie ahead for all of us, no one will be left without hope or opportunity.
Mexico's former president, Enrique Pena Nieto, has been accused of funneling millions of dollars in bribes to fund his election campaign and to buy votes and influence in Congress. He's accused of taking money from Odebrecht, a Brazilian construction firm that's admitted paying bribes in 12 countries, including Mexico. The former head of Mexico's state-run oil company, Emilio Lozoya, who's facing corruption charges, says Pena Nieto demanded that the money be given to his team.
In the case of Odebrecht, Lozoya said there were a series of bribes exceeding $4.4 million that were ultimately used for the 2012 presidential campaign. And the man who later became president, along with his finance minister, are the ones who, according to these accusations, ordered Lozoya to give this money to various election advisors from abroad.
Singapore is destroying at least 9 tons of confiscated elephant ivory. It's the largest haul in recent years. As part of its efforts against the illegal trade in wildlife, industrial rock crushers will need at least 5 days to destroy the entire contraband, worth up to $13 million. Nearly 5 million children have been born in Syria since the civil war began there 9 years ago. The conflict has had a devastating impact on their lives, with many forced to drop out of school to support their families. Now, aid agencies are warning a deepening economic crisis could push even more children into work. Priyanka Gupta reports.
Ahmed Mandura should be in school. Instead, He's spending his day at a car repair shop in Idlib province, trying to scrape a living.
I work to look after my family. If I don't work, we won't be able to live.
At home, his mother attempts to offer him a sense of normal childhood. Ahmed's father was arrested by government forces in 2012. The family has no idea where he is. Ahmed is only 13, but his short life has been defined by 9 years of war. He'll carry the scars into an uncertain future.
He used to go to school, then leave to work, and he kept doing so until the day the repair shop was bombed and he got injured. Seeing Ahmed like this breaks my heart because he cannot rest and he will never be able to. He used to go from school to work and can't take a break due to poverty. If he doesn't work, we won't be able to live. His younger brother also works now.
Half of Syria's children today have only known death, devastation and displacement. 41% of those old enough to be in school are not getting an education. For 75% of families in poverty, child labour has become an important source of income. There are fears that the collapse of the Syrian currency and an economic crisis will force even more children like Ahmed into work.
80% of people living in the war-torn country are reportedly living under $2 a day, which is basically nothing. And with the inflation of the currency and with the economic crisis in Syria, with imposing sanctions, it is likely that this number is underestimated, which means for children, more are going to be pushed into child labor.
The war has killed, maimed and traumatized Syria's children. It's also denied them their childhood. And as the conflict drags on, the future for this lost generation now seems even more stark. Priyanka Gupta, Al Jazeera.
Just ahead on the News Hour, staying safe while playing to win. Europe's top club football competition heads into all new territory.
Business Latest is brought to you by Nebraska Power. Business Latest is brought to you by Nebraska Power.
Winners of this season's European Champions League will be decided over the next 12 days in Portugal. A final 8 knockout tournament in Lisbon is replacing the competition's traditional format. French champions Paris Saint-Germain play Italian side Atalanta in Wednesday's first quarter-final. One-off knockout matches have replaced two-legged ties because of the disruption and delays caused by COVID-19. All of the games are taking place behind closed doors. Here's the full quarter-final lineup. Atletico Madrid playing RB Leipzig on Thursday. Then it's Barcelona v Bayern Munich. Now, Barca say an unnamed squad member has tested positive for COVID-19, but that he hasn't been in contact with any of the senior players. We'll be travelling to Lisbon on Thursday. Then on Saturday, we have Man City playing Lyon. Football writer Rob Harris is in Portugal. He told us about some of the precautions that are in place for these games.
We're even as media restricted in terms of our access to the players because they're all being regularly tested for COVID-19. They have to produce those negative findings to be allowed to enter the stadium. And there was that stark reminder of the ongoing threat from the coronavirus hanging over this tournament when 2 Atletico players tested positive at the delayed their planning, delayed training, but the competition is going to get underway. Atletico's game will go ahead against Leipzig. It'll be interesting to see going forward whether this actually is the they've earned their place here on merit, but the fact we're playing these single games rather than 2 legs will add the new sort of spice and new, I think, sense of importance to each of the games. There's no second chances. Once the game is being played, you've got to
Well, coronavirus is causing yet more disruption to the international football calendar. Asian World Cup qualifiers that were due to take place in October and November have now been pushed back into 2021. Matches in March and June were also postponed due to the pandemic. Was played in a biosecure location in Florida with no spectators. The Timbers did their best after the final whistle, celebrating with fans via a big screen on the side of the pitch. Serena Williams has returned to tennis with a win. The 23-time Grand Slam champion had last played a competitive match at Venus.
Honestly, I knew I've been practicing really well, and I wasn't getting a good rhythm out here, and I just kept thinking, Serena, play like you've been practicing. So I knew that I could play a little bit better if I just hung in there.
Damian Lillard scored a career-high 61 points to lead the Portland Trail Blazers to a win against the Dallas Mavericks. Lillard made history to score 60 points 3 times in a season. Portland went on to outlast the Mavs 134-131. The Blazers have moved into 8th place in the Western Conference. And Giannis Antetokounmpo said,
if I could go back, turn back the time and go back to LA, I wouldn't do it. But at the end of the day, we're all human, we all make mistakes.
Now, 2 of the biggest college football competitions in the United States have delayed their seasons due to coronavirus.
And to encourage our student athletes to participate in fall sports.
And the Tampa Bay Lightning and the Columbus Blue Jackets have just played out the 4th longest game in NHL history. Blue Jackets goalie Joonas Korpisalo made 85 saves, setting a new league record. Braden Point scored the winner in the 5th overtime.
Imeshatokea kwa Kevin Yondani kutoka Simba kwenda Yanga, imekuwa ikitokea mara kwa mara. Unadhani ni nini ambacho kimekuwa kinasababisha kujirudia kwa matukio kama haya?
Unajua wachezaji wanapofuatwa wanajengwa na watu kwamba anaambiwa wewe fanya, sisi tutakulinda, na kweli watu wanamlinda, anacheza. Kwa hiyo hata mtu mwingine akifanya afanye yeye, kuna watu nyuma yake wanamwambia wewe utafungiwa, wewe utafanya hivi. Lakini kuna wachezaji wa timu nyingine wamefungiwa, tulishashuhudia miaka 2 amesaini huko na huku, lakini kwa hivi vilabu vikubwa, narudia tena, ngumu, ndio unaobeba taswira ya mpira wetu. Kwa hiyo kuonekana vinakosea ni swala la bahati mbaya kwao kuadhibiwa, na maana hiyo kuadhibiwa haitatokea, na hala huwezi kukuta mchezaji ambaye anasaini Simba akitokea timu nyingine au anasaini Yanga akitokea timu nyingine. Hata wale timu ina madai wataambiwa subirini, mtalipa, mwacheni mkijana acheze, na ndio itakapotokea. Kwa hili sijui wataamua vipi, lakini nahisi ataulizwa mchezaji, chagua unapotaka kwenda, na nyinyi amewachagua na kuja kwenu, mpeni hela yake arudishe kule. Wale wametoa hela, itakatokea hivyo, nahisi hivyo maamuzi yanaweza akawa hivyo.
Asante sana.
Shukrani.
Bado vijembe vya pande zote mbili, kwa maana mashabiki wa Simba na Yanga, vinaendelea katika viwanja vya Karume Memorial Stadium, sehemu ambapo ziko ofisi za shirikisho la soka Tanzania TFF. Nikukumbushe tu Bernard Morrison kwa mara ya kwanza anakuja Tanzania alikuja dirisha dogo la usajili na akasaini mkataba wa miezi 6 wa kutumikia Yanga, ambapo baadaye baada ya kuonyesha uwezo mzuri inasemekana kwamba aliongezwa mkataba wa miaka 2 na Yanga ukiwa unaelekea ukingoni ule, lakini sasa hivi mwenyewe amesema hakuongeza mkataba na Yanga, ila aliwahi kufanya nao mazungumzo ya kuongeza mkataba, lakini Yanga wamesema wanao ambao wamewasilisha mezani, na Morrison ameagiza au ameoleta document ya mkataba wake miezi 6 ambao wanasema yeye ndo anautambua kwamba yuko nao. Upande wa pili Simba tayari washatangaza kumsajili. Sasa haijulikani kama ikitoka, je, ana mkataba na Yanga, adhabu Simba watapata, lakini pia ikitoka huru, mashabiki wa Simba itakuwa ni furaha kwao, maana atakuwa amemnasa Bernard Morrison. Jeshi la polisi tayari limewasili na limeongeza idadi ya askari kuwepo hapa, kwa sababu kadri ya muda unavyozidi kwenda inaonekana idadi kubwa mashabiki wamezidi kujitokeza, kwa maana ya kuhakikisha hali ya ulinzi wa usalama. Mashabiki hawagombani, lakini kilichotokea ni kurushiana maneno ya utani baina ya mashabiki wa Simba na Yanga. Mashabiki wa Simba wenyewe wanasema wenyewe ni wageni waalikwa katika hii issue, kwa maana ya kwamba haiwahusu, ila wanachotaka kufahamu au wangependa kuona Morrison akiwa huru, kwa sababu amesajiliwa upande wao na msimu wa ligi kuu soka Tanzania bara unakaribia kuanza mwezi Septemba. Kwa hiyo kama atakuwa amemsajili na kesi ikaisha mapema, maana ataungana na wachezaji wenzake mara atakaporejea na kuanza kambi ya maandalizi ya msimu mpya, ambapo mapumziko yamekuwa mafupi kidogo kwa sababu ya corona na ligi ilisimama kwa muda kama miezi 3. Hivyo ile miezi 3 iliyosimama ni kama wamehesabu kama ni mapumziko kwa wachezaji. Naye mmoja kati ya mashabiki wa soka ambaye yuko hapa naye inasemekana ni miongoni mwa waliofika asubuhi. Mambo vipi kaka?
Poa ndugu yangu, niambie.
Unaitwa nani?
Naitwa Hussein almaarufu Mboto, mshabiki wa Yanga da Afrika.
Hussein, umefika hapa toka saa ngapi?
Nimefika hapa toka saa 9.
Lakini kwa nini imekushinikiza kuja hapa wakati ulikuwa una uwezo wa kupata taarifa kupitia vyombo vya habari ambavyo viko hapa, vimeweka kambi toka jana juzi?
Ujue la ya ngoma unatakiwa uingie ucheze ndio utaona la yake. Kwa hiyo nimekuja hapa nipate matokeo hapa kwa hapa. Lakini kama sisi Yanga, kama mimi mshabiki wa Yanga na Yanga wenzangu wote, kama itabahatika Yanga watashinda hii kesi, sisi mchezaji hatumtaki. Kwanza ana nidhamu. Mechi ya Simba na Yanga alifanywa sabu akatoka nje moja kwa moja, inaonesha ana nidhamu. Mechi ya juzi ya Alikiba na Samata kafanya mazoezi upande wa Alikiba, mwisho wa siku tumemwona kachezea kwa Samata. Sasa tunashindwa kumwelewa huyu akili zake.
Si bonanza tu?
Bonanza ndio, lakini haiwezekani. Kule tunajua yule Samata mtu wa wapi, na sisi Alikiba tunajua mtu wa wapi. Yule katuvuruga sana sisi wananchi.
Wewe unatamani kuona maamuzi yakitoka yapi? Akitoka mchezaji yuko huru au akitoka kwa mchezaji yuko Yanga?
Mimi ninachotaka TFF wafuate sheria, mikataba yote wanakaa nayo wao, wajue kama